dear lovers of ancient tales, welcome to all who seek the wisdom of ages past, to those who find comfort in stories whispered across millennia, and to every soul who comes to this sacred space seeking rest and tranquility. Welcome, devoted listeners of Greek mythology. Welcome to those who return night after night to hear these eternal stories retold. Welcome to new wanderers who have just discovered our quiet corner of the ancient world in the soft twilight between waking and dreaming, where olive branches sway in Mediterranean breezes and marble temples gleam beneath eternal stars. There dwells a presence both fierce and gentle, both warrior and philosopher, both daughter and motherless child. Tonight we speak of Athena, she of the gray eyes and infinite wisdom, whose very birth defied the natural order, and whose guidance shaped the fate of mortals and immortals alike. Before we begin this journey through mist and memory, through wisdom and wonder, if you enjoy these quiet journeys through ancient myth, feel free to subscribe to Greek Myths for sleep and leave a gentle like it helps this story reach others who need rest, just like you. Your support allows these ancient tales to find new dreamers, new seekers of peaceful slumber and timeless wisdom. Let us begin where all strange tales must begin, in that time before time when the world was still learning its shape, when the boundaries between thought and reality were as permeable as morning mist. High upon Mount Olympus, where clouds embrace golden palaces and ambrosial fragrances drift through halls of eternity, where the very air shimmers with divine power and possibility, the gods once gathered in concern over a prophecy most troubling. Zeus, king of all divinities, master of sky and thunder, he whose will could shake the foundations of the cosmos, had taken Medes as his first wife. She was no ordinary goddess, this Medes, but the very embodiment of wisdom itself, she whose counsel had helped Zeus overcome the mighty Titans, whose strategic mind had planned the overthrow of Kronos the Devourer. Their union was one of power and intellect combined, a marriage that promised to birth wonders beyond imagining. But in those days, prophecy held sway even over the immortals, and the fates had spoken words that chilled even Zeus' mighty heart. They whispered that any child born of Medes would grow to surpass even the thunder god himself, that a son would one day rise to cast him down, as he had cast down his own father, perpetuating the cycle of patricide that seemed woven into the very fabric of divine succession. The prophecy hung over Olympus like a storm cloud, dark with potential catastrophe. Zeus pondered long upon this prophecy, walking the golden halls of his palace, consulting with the other gods, staring into the sacred flames that showed glimpses of possible futures. Some counseled him to simply avoid fathering children with Medes, but the fates' words suggested that such conception was not merely possible, but inevitable. Others suggested keeping any child that might be born under constant watch, but Zeus remembered how his own father Kronos had tried to prevent prophecy by swallowing his children, and how futile that had proven. In the end, Zeus chose a path that seemed to thread between all dangers. Using his power of transformation, he challenged Medes to a contest of shape-changing, each taking forms more minute than the last. When Medes, in her pride and playfulness, became a single drop of pure thought, Zeus seized his opportunity and swallowed her whole, believing this would end the threat forever. If Medes herself was contained within him, surely no child could be born to threaten his throne. But wisdom, true wisdom, cannot be so easily contained or destroyed. It finds a way, like water seeping through stone, like seeds sprouting in the most unlikely places. Within Zeus, Medes continued to exist, her essence merging with his, but maintaining its own nature. And within her, unknown to the thunder god, a child had already been conceived, not in the usual manner of divine or mortal birth, but in a way unique to all creation. This child developed not in womb, but in mind, not in body, but in pure consciousness. Day by day, month by month, year by year, for the gestation of such a being could not be measured in mortal time, the child grew. She was nourished not by ambrosia or nectar, but by thought itself, by every wise decision Zeus made, by every moment of reflection and consideration. Medes, even trapped within her husband, continued her role as counselor. And with each piece of wisdom she offered, their daughter grew stronger. The pregnancy of the mind manifested in strange ways. Zeus found himself pondering questions he had never considered before, seeing patterns in the cosmos that had previously escaped his notice. His judgments became more nuanced, his understanding deeper. The other gods noticed the change, but could not identify its source. Hera, his queen, watched with suspicion, wondering what could cause such transformation in her often impulsive husband. As time passed, and time moves strangely for immortals, sometimes racing like a mountain stream, sometimes pooling like water in a sacred grove, Zeus began to feel a strange pressure building within his immortal form. What started as the faintest discomfort, like a thought one cannot quite grasp, grew into something more substantial. His head began to ache with increasing intensity, as though all the thoughts of the universe were attempting to burst forth at once. The pain was unlike anything the Lord of Thunder had experienced. It was not the sharp agony of a wound in battle, nor the dull throb of overindulgence in nectar. This was the pain of something trying to exist, of reality itself straining to accommodate a new form of being. Zeus tried every remedy known to gods and mortals, sacred herbs from the gardens of Olympus, the healing songs of Apollo, even the waters of Lethe to forget the pain. Nothing provided relief. The divine headache grew so severe that Zeus' groans shook the pillars of heaven. Thunder rolled across the sky without clouds to birth it. Lightning flickered in his eyes with each spike of pain. The other gods gathered in concern, for when the King of Heaven suffers, all creation feels the tremors. Hera suggested it might be punishment for some unknown transgression, but Apollo's oracular sight could detect no curse. Hermes wondered if it might be some new weapon of the Titans, striking from their prison in Tartarus. But Poseidon confirmed the ancient enemies remained securely bound. Finally, when the pain became so unbearable that even Zeus' legendary endurance reached its limit, he called out for aid from the one god whose hands could craft solutions to impossible problems. Hephaestus, the divine smith, master of forge and flame, came limping to his father's aid. Despite the complexities of their relationship, for Zeus had hurled Hephaestus from Olympus. As a child, the smith god responded to genuine need. Hephaestus examined Zeus with the same careful attention he gave to metal before working it. His hands, calloused from eons at the forge, gently probed the thunder god's skull. What he felt there defied explanation, not the bone and brain of even divine anatomy, but something else, a pressure that seemed to come from within and without simultaneously. The smith god's eyes widened with understanding. This was not a malady to be cured, but a birth to be facilitated. In the golden light of an Olympian dawn, with all the gods gathered to witness what would unfold, Hephaestus prepared his tools. Some say it was his mighty hammer, the same that forged Zeus' lightning bolts and Achilles' armor. Others claim it was a special axe created for this unique purpose, its blade sharp enough to cut between thoughts. Still others insist it was not a tool at all, but Hephaestus' understanding of how to open what wished to be opened, how to create a doorway where none had existed before. The moment of striking required perfect precision. Too gentle, and the opening would not be sufficient. Too forceful, and even a god might be truly harmed. Hephaestus raised his chosen instrument, muscles tensing with the control that comes from centuries of practice. The assembled gods held their breath, those who breathe. Even the fates paused in their eternal weaving to witness this unprecedented moment. The strike fell with a sound that was not quite sound. It was the noise of conception becoming birth, of potential becoming actual, of thought becoming form. Some who were present claimed they heard the music of the spheres in that instant, the fundamental harmony that underlies all existence. Others said it was silent as the space between heartbeats, profound in its absence of ordinary noise. From the opened crown of Zeus emerged not blood or brain matter, but light itself, not the harsh light of the sun or the cold light of the stars, but something new, a radiance that seemed to illuminate not just objects, but meanings, not just surfaces, but essences. And from that light stepped forth Athena, fully grown, clad in armor that gleamed like starlight on still water, each scale and joint perfectly crafted, as if by the greatest smith in existence. She carried a spear, that seemed to contain the very essence of justified defense, its point sharp enough to pierce lies and pretense as easily as flesh. Upon her breast rested a shield that would one day bear the image of the Gorgon, but even unmarked it radiated protection and power. Her helmet caught the light of dawn, creating a halo effect that made her seem even more otherworldly than her divine birth already suggested. But most striking of all were her eyes, gray as the sea before dawn, gray as the olive leaves that would become sacred to her, gray as the liminal space between black and white where all wisdom dwells. Those eyes held depths that seemed to contain libraries of unwritten books, strategies for wars not yet conceived, understanding of principles not yet discovered. When she gazed upon the assembled gods, each felt simultaneously judged and understood, challenged and accepted. The gods stood in awe, for here was a being unprecedented in all creation, born not of union, but of thought made manifest, emerging not through biological birth, but through pure manifestation of divine will and wisdom combined. The very cosmos seemed to recognize the significance of this moment. Stars pulsed brighter, the winds stilled to listen, even chaotic Dionysus sobered in the presence of such ordered power. Athena's first act was not one of violence, though she bore weapons, nor one of vanity, though her beauty rivaled Aphrodite's in its austere perfection. Instead, she spoke, and her words carried the weight of absolute understanding. She greeted Zeus as father, but also as student, for she understood that wisdom teaches even those from whom it springs. She acknowledged Medes within him, honoring the mother she had never met in the conventional sense, but whose essence had shaped every aspect of her being. The goddess' first words were themselves a teaching, showing the assembled deities that power could emerge from apparent submission, that being swallowed did not mean being destroyed, that new forms of existence could arise from seeming endings. She spoke of patterns within patterns, of how prophecy itself was but one thread in a tapestry too vast for even divine eyes to perceive completely. The fates, watching from their sacred cave, nodded in recognition. Here was one who understood their work not as fixed destiny, but as probability woven from choice and consequence. From that moment forward, Athena took her place among the Olympians, not merely as Zeus' daughter, but as something more, a bridge between the raw power of the old gods and the measured wisdom needed for the new world that was emerging. Where Ares brought blind fury to battle, Athena brought strategy. Where Poseidon ruled through tempest and earthquake, Athena influenced through counsel and craft. Where other gods demanded worship through fear or desire, Athena earned devotion through the gifts she bestowed upon humanity. Her integration into the pantheon was swift, but not without complexity. Hera, ever suspicious of Zeus' children born outside their marriage, initially viewed Athena with hostility, but the young goddess approached her father's wife with such respect and understanding that even Hera's jealous heart was somewhat softened. Athena acknowledged Hera's position as Queen of Heaven, never threatening that status, instead offering her strategic mind in service of Hera's own aims when they aligned with justice and order. With Apollo, god of prophecy and music, Athena found a kindred spirit in the pursuit of knowledge, though their approaches differed. Where Apollo's understanding came through divine inspiration and oracular vision, Athena's emerged from analysis and synthesis. They would spend hours in debate, not the angry arguments of opposing forces, but the productive dialogue of different perspectives seeking truth. Their temples would often be built near each other, prophecy and wisdom recognized as complementary forces. Artemis, the huntress, might have seen Athena's civilizing influence as opposition to wild nature. But the wise goddess understood that true civilization must exist in harmony with the natural world. She showed how hunting could be sustainable, how forests could be preserved even as cities grew, how the wild and the cultivated could enhance rather than destroy each other. The two virgin goddesses found common ground in their independence and their different but equally valid forms of power. With Hermes, the trickster and messenger, Athena developed a particularly interesting relationship. His cunning and her wisdom might seem at odds, but she recognized that cleverness had its place in the cosmic order, that sometimes the indirect path served better than the straight line. She taught him that the greatest tricks were those that revealed truth rather than obscured it, while he showed her that wisdom sometimes needed to wear the mask of folly to be heard by those who feared its demands. The establishment of Athena's worship among mortals began almost immediately after her dramatic birth. Unlike gods who demanded grand temples from the start, Athena's first sacred spaces were simple a grove where someone had experienced sudden understanding, a workshop where a craftsperson had breakthrough insight, a court where justice had prevailed against odds. These humble beginnings reflected her nature wisdom. Often start small, in individual minds and specific moments, before spreading to transform entire civilizations. The olive tree, that gift which would define civilizations and become Athena's most recognizable symbol, came to be through one of the most famous contests in mythological history. The city that would bear her name stood at a crossroads of destiny, a settlement poised to become either another forgotten village or a beacon of human achievement that would echo through millennia. Both Athena and Poseidon desired to be its patron, to guide its people and receive their honors. The contest for Athens represented more than just divine ego or the desire for worship. It was a fundamental choice about what kind of civilization humanity would build. Poseidon, mighty earthshaker, lord of seas and storms, offered the gifts of his domain naval power, the ability to explore and conquer, the resources of the vast oceans. His followers would be adventurers and warriors, their city a base for expansion and dominion. Athena understood that the mortals faced a choice that would echo through all their descendants. She observed the land carefully, the rocky soil, the hot summers, the strategic position for trade rather than conquest. Her gift must not only serve immediate needs, but create sustainable prosperity for generations uncounted. When her turn came in the contest, she did not try to outdo Poseidon's dramatic display of power. Instead, she knelt upon the rocky soil of the Acropolis and placed her hand gently upon the earth. Where divine skin met mortal ground, a change began, not violent or sudden, but organic and inevitable. A green shoot emerged, growing with preternatural grace, but also with the steady patience that would characterize its nature. The assembled mortals watched in wonder as the shoot became a sapling. The sapling became a tree, its trunk twisting with artistic grace, its leaves shimmering silver green in the Aegean light. This was the olive tree, and Athena explained its gifts with the patience of a teacher, ensuring every student understands. The fruit would nourish the people through lean seasons and rich ones alike, able to be preserved in ways that grain could not, providing sustenance when other crops failed. Its oil would light their lamps through dark nights, turning shadow into gentle illumination that would allow work and study to continue beyond sunset. That same oil would anoint their athletes before competitions, their babies after birth, their dead before burial, marking all the significant transitions of mortal life. The wood, hard and beautiful, would craft tools that lasted generations and artwork that captured eternal truths. The leaves could treat ailments and preserve other foods. Even the tree's longevity spoke to Athena's wisdom. An olive tree, planted by one generation, would still bear fruit for their great-great-grandchildren, encouraging mortals to think beyond their own brief lives, to plan and build for futures they would never see. The choice was clear to all but the most battle-hungry, and Athens became Athena's city, though Poseidon's gift was not scorned, but honored in its own right. The god of seas would have his temples and honors, for Athena's wisdom included understanding that excluding other powers bred resentment and conflict. This lesson that winning did not require the opponent's destruction would be one she taught repeatedly through action and example. The city of Athens grew under her guidance to become the marvel of the ancient world, not through military conquest, though its warriors were formidable when needed, but through the cultivation of human potential. In its workshops, craftsmen pushed the boundaries of what could be created with bronze and clay, wood and stone. In its academies, philosophers asked questions that had never been asked, developing systems of thought that would outlive empires. In its courts, the concept of justice evolved from simple vengeance to complex considerations of motive, evidence, and rehabilitation. Athena's influence could be felt in every aspect of Athenian life, but never as heavy-handed divine intervention. Instead, she worked through inspiration, through the sudden clarity that comes to a tired mind, through the pattern suddenly perceived in seeming chaos. A potter struggling with a new glaze technique would feel a subtle suggestion to try a different temperature. A playwright wrestling with how to convey complex moral questions would dream of structures that wove multiple perspectives together. A general planning, a campaign, would notice overlooked details on maps that suggested better strategies. In the great Panathenaic festival, held every 4 years in Athens, the intersection of religious devotion and civic pride created something new in human culture. The procession would begin at dawn outside the city walls, gathering citizens of every class and occupation. Maidens carried sacred baskets, young men led sacrificial animals, elderly citizens bore olive branches, and children scattered flower petals. Musicians played hymns composed specifically for Athena, their melodies incorporating mathematical ratios that Pythagoras would later claim to have discovered in the very structure of the cosmos. The centerpiece of the procession was the peplos, a sacred robe woven over 9 months by the most skilled women and girls of the city. This was no simple garment, but a work of art that told stories in thread. The main panel always depicted the gigantomachy, the cosmic battle between Olympian gods and primordial giants, with Athena prominent among the defenders of order. But the borders and subsidiary panels changed with each festival, incorporating recent events, honoring citizens who had served the city with distinction, weaving contemporary Athens into the eternal mythic narrative. The weaving of the peplos was itself a sacred act, performed in a special chamber on the Acropolis. The women chosen for this honor underwent purification rituals and maintained special diets during their work. They wove in silence mostly, but at certain prescribed times would sing work songs that were themselves prayers, each verse timed to particular movements of the loom. Young girls learning the craft would watch and gradually be allowed to contribute, first preparing threads, then working on simple borders, finally being trusted with figures and faces. This transmission of skill from generation to generation exemplified Athena's approach to knowledge. Unlike divine gifts that arrived complete and inexplicable, her wisdom built upon itself, each generation adding to what came before. The master weavers would teach not just technique, but the philosophy behind it, how tension must be consistent to create even cloth, how patterns emerged from the intersection of warp and weft, how a single broken thread could be worked into the design, rather than ruining it if one had the wisdom to adapt. The procession would wind through Athens, passing significant sites that told the story of the city's development under Athena's guidance. At the Areopagus, where Athena had established trial by jury, replacing blood vendetta with reasoned justice. The procession would pause while the archons recited the fundamental laws. These laws, attributed to various historical lawgivers, but all claiming Athena's inspiration, balanced the rights of individuals with the needs of the community in ways that would influence legal thinking for millennia. They passed the workshops of the Kerameikos, where potters and sculptors labored to create beauty that was also functional. Athena had taught that art and craft were not separate realms, but aspects of the same drive to improve upon nature through human skill and divine inspiration. A well-made amphora was as worthy of respect as a temple statue if both were created with dedication to excellence. This democratic approach to creativity, valuing the everyday alongside the extraordinary, fostered an explosion of artistic production that archaeologists would still be uncovering thousands of years later. The procession moved through the agora, that bustling heart of Athenian democracy, where citizens gathered to debate, trade, and socialize. Here Athena's influence was felt in the very structure of civic life. The circular tholos, where the executive committee met continuously, ensuring government never ceased functioning. The stoa, where philosophers would walk and teach, their measured paces matching the rhythms of logical argument. The law courts, where citizens served as jurors, implementing Athena's principle that justice belonged not to kings or priests alone, but to the community as a whole. As they climbed the sacred way to the Acropolis, the participants could see the Parthenon growing larger above them, its perfect proportions becoming more apparent with each step. This temple, dedicated to Athena Parthenos, Athena the Virgin, represented the culmination of architectural and mathematical knowledge. Every dimension was calculated using the golden ratio, creating a harmony that affected viewers on levels below conscious awareness. The columns swelled slightly at their centers and leaned inward imperceptibly, corrections that made them appear perfectly straight to the human eye wisdom, understanding and compensating for the imperfections of mortal perception. Inside the Parthenon stood Phidias' great statue of Athena Parthenos, nearly 40 feet tall, made of gold and ivory over a wooden core. The goddess stood in calm majesty, her left hand resting on her shield, her right extended, holding Nike, victory personified. But this Nike was not celebrating military triumph. She offered a wreath to the city itself. Victory in the greater battle against chaos, ignorance, and barbarism. The statue's eyes, made of precious stones, seemed to follow viewers, creating the uncanny sense that the goddess truly inhabited her image. The presentation of the new peplos was the climax of the festival. The old garment would be removed with ceremony, treated not as discarded cloth, but as a sacred relic that had absorbed a measure of divinity through contact with the goddess image. The new peplos would be draped with precise rituals, each fold having meaning, the final arrangement revealing the full glory of the woven narrative. Prayers would be offered, sacrifices made, and then the citizens would feast, understanding that communion with the divine came not just through solitary mysticism, but through collective celebration. Beyond Athens, Athena's influence spread throughout the Greek world and beyond. In Sparta, that militaristic state that might seem antithetical to Athena's values, she was honored as Athena Chalciochus, Athena of the Bronze House. But even there, her worship emphasized strategy over brutality, discipline over bloodlust. Spartan generals would consult her oracles before campaigns, and her priests would remind them that the greatest victory was achieving objectives with minimal losses, that dead soldiers could win no future battles. In the island cities of the Aegean, where trade and craftsmanship flourished, Athena presided over guilds and markets. Contracts would be sworn in her name, with the understanding that attempting to cheat or deceive would invoke not just legal penalties, but divine displeasure. This religious sanction for honest dealing helped create the trust necessary for long-distance trade, allowing merchants to do business with partners they might meet only rarely, knowing that shared reverence for Athena's justice provided some protection against fraud. Her sacred birds, the owls, became symbols recognized across cultures. The little owl, Athena noctua, appeared on Athenian coins that became the standard currency throughout much of the Mediterranean. Owls to Athens became a proverb for unnecessary actions, like carrying coals to Newcastle in later eras. But beyond mere symbolism, the owl represented qualities Athena wished to cultivate in her followers: the ability to see in darkness, both literal and metaphorical, patience in hunting, waiting for the right moment rather than pursuing rashly, silent flight that allowed observation without disturbance. The goddess virginity, that state that set her apart from many other deities, was not a rejection of sexuality or relationships, but a statement about the nature of her power and purpose. Unlike Hera, whose identity was bound to her role as wife, or Aphrodite, whose power flowed through romantic and sexual connections, Athena stood complete in herself. This self-sufficiency sent a powerful message, particularly to women in a patriarchal society, that female power could exist independently, that worth was not determined solely by relationships to men. This did not make Athena cold or disconnected from emotion. Her relationships with favored mortals showed deep affection and commitment. But these were relationships of mentor and student, protector and protected, wisdom guiding potential toward actualization. She was the divine embodiment of the teacher who takes joy in students surpassing their instruction, the parent who prepares children for independence rather than dependence. Among her most beloved mortals was Odysseus, that clever king of Ithaca, whose journey home from Troy became an epic of wisdom triumphing over force. From their first meeting, when young Odysseus competed in games at Sparta and showed cunning beyond his years, Athena recognized a kindred spirit. Here was a mortal who understood that strength of arm meant little without strength of mind, who could see 3 moves ahead like a master chess player, who knew when to fight, when to run, when to hide, and when to reveal himself. During the Trojan War itself, Athena's favor for Odysseus manifested in numerous ways. When the Greeks despaired of ever breaching Troy's walls through conventional warfare, it was to Odysseus that Athena sent the dream of the wooden horse. The dream came not as a complete blueprint, but as a series of images, horses sacred to Poseidon, hollow spaces that could hold secrets, the Trojans' fatal combination of piety and pride. Odysseus woke with the pieces, but had to assemble them himself. Athena's usual method of assistance that developed rather than replaced mortal capability. The construction of the Trojan horse required not just Odysseus' strategic vision, but the cooperation of the entire Greek force. Athena influenced each according to their nature, inspiring Epius, the carpenter, with techniques for building on such scale, calming Neoptolemus' youthful impatience for direct assault, even working through Sinon, the volunteer who would remain behind to sell the deception, giving him the words that would convince the Trojans while still allowing them the free will to choose their fate. When Odysseus began his long journey home, Athena's protection took different forms, adapted to each challenge. Against the Cyclops Polyphemus, she sharpened his wit to devise the nobody stratagem, understanding that sometimes the greatest weapon is the enemy's own voice. When he faced Circe's enchantments, Athena worked through Hermes to provide the herb moly. But more importantly, she gave Odysseus the wisdom to see that Circe could become an ally rather than an enemy if approached correctly. With the sirens, those creatures whose song promised knowledge of all things, Athena's influence helped Odysseus recognize that some knowledge comes at too high a price. That wisdom includes knowing what not to learn. His solution having his men block their ears, while he listened tied to the mast, exemplified the balance Athena taught between prudent caution and necessary risk-taking. He gained the experience of the siren's song without losing himself to it, adding to his store of wisdom without paying wisdom's ultimate price. During his years on Calypso's island, when the nymph offered him immortality as her eternal consort, Athena's influence was felt in his refusal. Many would see turning down eternal life as folly, but Odysseus understood what Athena had always taught, that meaning comes from limitation, that immortality without purpose is merely an endless existence, that his mortality and his connections to specific people and places gave his life significance that no amount of divine ambrosia could provide. When Odysseus finally reached Ithaca, disguised as a beggar, Athena appeared to him directly for one of the few times in his journey. Their meeting was a masterpiece of mutual understanding and respect. Both maintained false appearances, he as a beggar, she as a young shepherd, while knowing the other saw through the disguise. Their conversation danced between truth and deception, each testing the other, until finally both dropped their masks and spoke as the old friends and allies they were. Athena's advice for reclaiming his kingdom showed her deep understanding of human nature. She counseled patience when Odysseus' heart cried for immediate revenge on the suitors. She helped him test the loyalty of his servants and the virtue of his son, understanding that a kingdom reclaimed by slaughter alone would be founded on blood rather than justice. The final confrontation with the suitors, while violent, was preceded by every attempt to resolve matters peacefully, establishing Odysseus' right not just through strength, but through law and custom. Even after the suitors' defeat, Athena's wisdom prevailed in preventing the cycle of vengeance that could have destroyed Ithaca. When the suitors' families gathered to avenge their dead, the goddess intervened not with thunderbolts, but with words, speaking through the aged prophet to remind all present that justice had been served, that continuing violence would only breed more violence. Her final gift to Odysseus was not victory, but peace, the harder achievement that required all parties to choose wisdom over wrath. The relationship between Athena and Odysseus became a model for how divinity and humanity could interact productively. She never solved his problems for him, but illuminated paths he might take. She protected him from some consequences of his actions, but allowed him to experience others as necessary lessons. Most importantly, she treated him as a friend, and equal within the bounds of their different natures, showing that gods and mortals could relate through mutual respect rather than mere worship and domination. Another of Athena's favored heroes was Perseus, whose quest to slay Medusa would have been impossible without divine aid, but succeeded ultimately through his own courage and cleverness. The challenge seemed straightforward: bring back the head of the Gorgon Medusa, but the complications were numerous. Medusa's gaze turned viewers to stone, making direct combat impossible. She dwelt in a region at the edge of the world, difficult to reach and harder to escape. Her sisters were immortal, ensuring that killing Medusa would bring immediate pursuit. Athena's aid to Perseus began with strategic planning. She appeared to him not in dreams or visions, but directly, treating him as a serious partner in the enterprise rather than a mere tool. She explained the nature of the challenge, ensuring he understood not just what to do, but why each element mattered. The shield she provided was polished to mirror brightness, but she taught him how to maintain that polish, how to angle it for different light conditions, how to trust the reflection even when instinct demanded direct sight. She arranged for other gods to contribute gifts, understanding that complex problems required multiple resources. From Hermes came winged sandals for escape, and an adamantine sword capable of cutting through Medusa's scales. From Hades came the cap of invisibility, allowing Perseus to approach undetected. From the Gree, those ancient sisters who shared one eye, came directions to the Gorgon's lair, though Perseus had to win this information through clever negotiation rather than receiving it freely. The quest itself tested every quality Athena valued. Patience, as Perseus waited for the right moment when Medusa slept. Precision, as he guided his sword strike using only the shield's reflection. Courage, as he acted despite knowing that the slightest error meant petrification. And perhaps most importantly, restraint, taking only Medusa's head when the cave held treasures that would tempt any mortal. Understanding that greed would slow his escape from the pursuing immortal Gorgons. On his return journey, Perseus encountered situations that transformed him from mere hero to agent of justice. Finding Andromeda chained to rocks as sacrifice to a sea monster, he could have passed by, his quest complete, but Athena's influence had taught him that true heroism meant using power to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. His rescue of Andromeda and defeat of the monster established a pattern. The Gorgon's head, instrument of death, became in his hands a tool for protecting the innocent. When Perseus finally returned home, he discovered his mother Danae persecuted by the king Polydectes, who had sent Perseus on the quest hoping he would die. Here, Athena's lessons about justice came to fruition. Perseus could have simply killed Polydectes, but instead he announced his return publicly, allowing the king and his supporters to gather in the throne room. Only when Polydectes mocked him, claiming the quest had failed, did Perseus reveal Medusa's head, turning the tyrant and his enablers to stone while warning the innocent to avert their eyes. After his adventures, Perseus gave Medusa's head to Athena in gratitude, and she placed it upon her aegis, transforming curse into protection. This act exemplified her deepest teaching, that wisdom lies not in destroying dangerous forces, but in finding ways to redirect them toward beneficial ends. The head that had been Medusa's curse became Athens' shield, protecting the just and terrifying the unjust, its power channeled and controlled by divine wisdom. The aegis itself became one of Athena's most recognizable attributes, its meaning evolving over time. In early depictions, it was a goatskin cape fringed with serpents, primal and somewhat savage. After adding Medusa's head, it became more sophisticated, a bronze breastplate in some versions, an elaborate shield in others, but always it represented the same principle, that wisdom must be coupled with the power to defend itself and others. That being right means little if one lacks the strength to resist wrong. Beyond individual heroes, Athena's influence shaped entire institutions of learning and governance. The Areopagus, Athens' ancient court for trying cases of homicide, claimed foundation under her direct guidance. The story told of the final transformation of justice from vendetta to law involved the trial of Orestes, who had killed his mother Clytemnestra to avenge her murder of his father Agamemnon. The Furies, ancient spirits of vengeance, pursued Orestes relentlessly, their justice knowing only blood for blood. Athena intervened not by dismissing the Furies' claims, but by establishing a new framework for addressing them. She convened the first jury trial, selecting 12 Athenian citizens to hear evidence and arguments from both sides. Apollo spoke for Orestes, arguing that his act was justified by his mother's prior crime and his duty to avenge his father. The Furies presented their case that matricide was the ultimate violation of natural law, that allowing it to go unpunished would unravel the fabric of society. The trial established principles that would echo through legal history. Evidence was presented systematically rather than through emotional appeals. Witnesses were called and questioned. The accused was allowed to speak in his own defense. Most importantly, judgment was removed from the hands of the interested parties and given to neutral citizens who could weigh arguments objectively. When the jury split evenly, Athena cast the deciding vote for acquittal, establishing the principle that tied decisions should favor the accused the origin of reasonable doubt. But Athena's wisdom went beyond merely establishing new procedures. She understood that the Furies represented something essential, the human need to see wrongdoing punished, the social requirement that actions have consequences. Simply dismissing them would leave a void that vigilante justice would fill. Instead, she offered them a new role as the Eumenides, the kindly ones, protectors of justice rather than avengers. They would still pursue wrongdoers, but within the framework of law, ensuring that the guilty faced trial rather than summary execution. This transformation from Furies to Eumenides represented one of humanity's great evolutionary steps, facilitated by divine wisdom. The same impulse that drove blood feuds could be channeled into maintaining justice systems. The rage that demanded immediate vengeance could become the determination that ensured no crime went uninvestigated. Athena showed that civilization advanced not by suppressing primal forces, but by giving them constructive outlets. The influence of this mythic trial extended far beyond Athens. As Greek culture spread through trade and later conquest, the idea of trial by jury traveled with it. Roman law incorporated versions of influenced legal systems throughout Europe and eventually much of the world. The specific procedures varied enormously, but the core principle Athena established that justice should be a community responsibility, exercised through reason rather than emotion, became a cornerstone of civilization. In the realm of philosophy, Athena's influence was felt even when not explicitly acknowledged. The pre-Socratic philosophers who first began asking systematic questions about the nature of reality were, in a sense, following paths Athena had indicated when Thales proposed that water was the fundamental substance of all things. He was wrong in specifics, but right in approach seeking underlying unity beneath apparent diversity, using observation and reason rather than accepting traditional myths uncritically. Heraclitus, with his doctrine of eternal flux and the logos that govern change, came closer to Athena's teachings. His famous statement that war is the father of all things might seem to contradict Athena's preference for peace, but he meant not physical battle, but the creative tension between opposites that drives development. This dialectical thinking, understanding that progress comes through the resolution of contradictions rather than the victory of one side, aligned perfectly with Athena's methods. When Socrates walked the streets of Athens, claiming to be the wisest man because he knew that he knew nothing, he was embodying Athena's deepest teaching. True wisdom begins with intellectual humility, with recognizing the limits of one's knowledge. His method of persistent questioning, drawing out contradictions in his interlocutor's beliefs, served Athena's purpose of replacing false certainty with productive uncertainty. His famous daemonion, the inner voice that warned him away from wrong actions, many recognized as Athena's influence internalized. Socrates' trial and execution marked a tragic moment in Athens' history, but even this served Athena's larger purposes. His calm acceptance of the hemlock, his refusal to flee when friends arranged escape, his final words about owing a rooster to Asclepius, all demonstrated that wisdom's ultimate test was how one faced death. His student Plato would transform this personal example into a philosophical system that would influence human thought for millennia. Plato's Academy, established in a grove sacred to the hero Academos, became a physical manifestation of Athena's approach to knowledge. Students studied not just philosophy, but mathematics, astronomy, and what would later be called the natural sciences. The famous inscription, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter," was not mere elitism, but recognition that understanding spatial relationships and logical proofs prepared the mind for grasping more abstract truths. The mathematical order underlying reality was, for Platonists, evidence of divine reason structuring the cosmos. The theory of forms, Plato's most famous doctrine, can be read as an elaboration of Athena's nature. Just as she sprang fully formed from Zeus' head, the forms exist eternally and perfectly in a realm beyond physical reality. The form of justice, the form of beauty, the form of the good itself, these were the patterns that wise individuals tried to perceive and embody in the imperfect material world. The philosopher's journey from the cave of ignorance to the sunlight of truth recapitulated Athena's birth from darkness into light. Plato's student Aristotle took Greek philosophy in new directions that were equally Athenian in spirit. Where Plato emphasized transcendent ideals, Aristotle studied the empirical world in all its messy complexity. His systematic approach to knowledge categorizing, analyzing, finding the principles that governed different domains reflected Athena's own method of bringing order to chaos. His work on logic, establishing the rules of valid reasoning, gave mortals tools for distinguishing good arguments from bad, wisdom from mere cleverness. In ethics, Aristotle's doctrine of the golden mean aligned perfectly with Athena's teachings. Virtue lay not in extremes, but in finding the appropriate balance for each situation. Courage was the mean between cowardice and recklessness. Generosity lay between stinginess and profligacy. This contextual understanding of virtue, recognizing that the same action might be virtuous or vicious depending on circumstances, showed wisdom's practical face. Athena had always taught that abstract principles must be applied with judgment, not mechanically. The Lyceum that Aristotle founded differed from Plato's academy in significant ways that reflected different aspects of Athena's influence. Where the academy focused on mathematics and abstract reasoning, the Lyceum collected specimens, conducted observations, and built up knowledge empirically. Aristotle and his students created the first systematic approaches to biology, meteorology, and psychology. They walked while discussing the peripatetic school, understanding that physical movement aided mental activity, that the body and mind were partners rather than antagonists. When Alexander, Aristotle's most famous student, conquered much of the known world, he carried Greek culture and Athena's influence to lands that had never heard her name. In Egypt, where he was crowned pharaoh, Alexander recognized the local goddess Neith as a form of Athena, understanding that wisdom transcended cultural boundaries. The city of Alexandria he founded became a new Athens. Its famous library and museum, dedicated to preserving and expanding human knowledge under divine patronage. The Library of Alexandria represented Athena's influence at its most ambitious. The goal was nothing less than collecting all human knowledge in one place, making it available to scholars regardless of origin. Texts were translated between languages. Commentary was added to preserve context, and new works were constantly created. The librarians saw themselves as servants of wisdom itself, maintaining the collection not for power or profit, but because knowledge preserved was knowledge that could inspire future discoveries. The organizational systems developed at Alexandria, cataloging by subject and author, cross-referencing related works, creating standardized copies seem mundane now, but were revolutionary innovations. They reflected Athena's teaching that wisdom without organization becomes mere accumulation, that true understanding requires not just information, but the ability to find and connect relevant pieces. The tragic destruction of the library, in stages over centuries, represented not just the loss of texts, but the forgetting of these organizational principles that would have to be painfully rediscovered. In the realm of crafts and technology, Athena's influence continued to inspire innovation. The development of the Antikythera mechanism, that extraordinary ancient computer capable of predicting astronomical events, showed what human ingenuity could achieve when guided by divine inspiration. Its makers understood that the cosmos operated according to mathematical principles, that these could be modeled in bronze and expressed through precisely calibrated gears. The device embodied Athena's fusion of theoretical understanding and practical application. Architecture advanced under her patronage from mere shelter to expression of divine proportion. The principles of symmetry, harmony, and mathematical relationships that governed temple construction were understood as reflecting cosmic order. A properly built temple was a microcosm, its proportions echoing those that structured the universe itself. The slight curves and adjustments that made buildings appear perfect to human perception showed understanding of psychology, as well as engineering wisdom, recognizing that serving human needs sometimes required departing from abstract perfection. In warfare, despite Athena's preference for peace, her strategic insights revolutionized military thinking. The phalanx formation, where soldiers locked shields to create an impenetrable wall, embodied her principle of collective strength through coordination. Each soldier protected not himself, but the man to his right, creating interdependence that made the whole far stronger than its parts. This required not just physical training, but psychological transformation, overcoming the instinct for self-preservation in favor of group survival. The development of siege warfare showed Athena's influence in its methodical approach to seemingly impossible problems. When direct assault failed, engineers inspired by the goddess created solutions, siege towers that turned height disadvantage into advantage, battering rams that concentrated force at weak points, tunnels that bypassed walls entirely, but always with the understanding that the goal was not destruction, but victory. And victory meant achieving objectives with minimal losses on both sides when possible. Naval warfare under Athena's influence became a chess match of positioning and timing rather than mere ramming contests. The trireme, with its 3 banks of oars and bronze-sheathed ram, represented the pinnacle of ancient naval engineering. But success required more than good ships. It demanded understanding wind and current, predicting enemy movements, coordinating complex maneuvers where hundreds of rowers had to act as one. Athenian naval supremacy came not from having more ships, but from using them more wisely. Even in defeat, Athena's lessons proved valuable. When Athens lost the Peloponnesian War to Sparta, the goddess' wisdom was seen in how the city recovered, rather than succumbing to despair or seeking revenge. Athenians rebuilt their cultural institutions, continued philosophical inquiry, and maintained the educational systems that would eventually reconquer their conquerors culturally. The Academy and Lyceum survived the city's political eclipse, preserving and developing wisdom that would outlast empires. In the domestic sphere, Athena's influence elevated activities often dismissed as mere women's work to recognition as essential civilizing arts. Weaving, her particular craft, was understood not just as producing cloth, but as a metaphor for creating order from chaos, beauty from raw materials. The patterns woven into fabric carried meaning family histories, mythological tales, abstract designs that pleased the eye while training it to perceive mathematical relationships. The vertical loom, operated standing, was Athena's gift to mortals, allowing larger and more complex textiles than the primitive ground looms. But beyond the technology, she taught the patience and planning weaving required. A tapestry could take months or years to complete, requiring sustained vision of the final product while attending to minute daily progress. Mistakes could not simply be erased, but had to be incorporated, or the entire section unraveled. This taught forethought and acceptance of imperfection as part of the creative process. Dyeing, too, was under Athena's protection. The transformation of white wool into brilliant colors through knowledge of plants, minerals, and chemical processes. The famous Tyrian purple, worth more than gold, required understanding not just of the murex snails that produced it, but of the precise conditions for extraction and application. Each color had its own requirements, its own secrets passed from master to apprentice, creating guilds that preserved and developed technical knowledge across generations. In pottery, Athena's influence was felt in both the functional and the decorative. The basic shapes, amphorae for storage, craters for mixing wine, kylixes for drinking, evolved to perfectly serve their purposes while pleasing the eye. The development of the potter's wheel allowed symmetrical forms impossible to achieve by hand building alone. But mere technical skill was insufficient. True masters understood how form and function interrelated, how a vessel's shape affected its contents, how decoration could enhance rather than merely ornament utility. The famous black and red figure techniques of Greek pottery showed Athena's principle of achieving maximum effect through disciplined limitation. Using only the contrast between fired clay and slip, artists created scenes of extraordinary vitality and detail. The limitations of the medium forced creative solutions, how to show depth on a flat surface, how to indicate movement in a static image, how to tell a story in the space available on a curved vessel. These constraints, rather than hindering creativity, channeled it toward ever more sophisticated solutions. In medicine, Athena worked alongside Apollo and Asclepius, but brought her own insights, where Apollo provided sudden inspiration and Asclepius taught specific remedies. Athena emphasized systematic observation and logical diagnosis. The Hippocratic corpus, with its emphasis on recording symptoms, tracking disease progression, and identifying patterns across cases, showed her influence. The famous oath, while invoking multiple deities, embodied Athena's understanding that healing required not just knowledge, but wisdom in its application. The concept of the four humors blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile represented an early attempt at systematic medical theory. While wrong in specifics, it was right in approach, seeking underlying principles rather than treating each illness as unique. The emphasis on balance among humors reflected Athena's general teaching about harmony and proportion. Diet, exercise, and environment were understood as factors in health, moving beyond purely supernatural explanations for disease. Surgical instruments from ancient Greece show remarkable sophistication, with specialized tools for different procedures. But Athena's influence was seen more in, when not to use them, the understanding that the body's own healing powers, properly supported, were often superior to dramatic intervention. The Hippocratic principle first, do no harm, embodied her wisdom that action for its own sake was inferior to carefully considered response or even deliberate inaction. In mathematics, Athena's influence helped transform practical calculation into theoretical understanding. The Pythagoreans, while devoted primarily to Apollo, showed her touch in their systematic exploration of numerical relationships. The discovery that musical harmony depended on mathematical ratios suggested divine order underlying sensory experience. The proof that the square root of 2 was irrational, neither whole number nor fraction, forced expansion of the very concept of number, showing how wisdom grew through confronting contradictions. Euclidean geometry, compiled in Alexandria, but drawing on centuries of Greek mathematical thought, represented Athena's method at its purest. Starting from simple axioms and definitions, building through logical steps to complex theorems, creating a system where each proof depended on previous proofs. This was wisdom made visible. The parallel postulate, which seemed necessary but unprovable, taught humility about the limits of even mathematical certainty. The application of mathematics to astronomy showed Athena bridging theoretical and practical knowledge. Calculating eclipse cycles allowed prediction of events that had terrified earlier generations. Understanding planetary motion revealed order in what had seemed random wandering. The precession of the equinoxes, discovered by Hipparchus, showed that even the fixed stars moved according to discoverable patterns. Each discovery revealed new depths of cosmic order waiting to be understood. In agriculture, Athena's olive remained the supreme gift, but her influence extended to all forms of cultivation. Crop rotation, terracing steep hillsides, irrigation systems that distributed water fairly all showed wisdom applied to working with rather than against nature. The Greek understanding that different soils suited different crops, that timing mattered as much as technique, that sustainable practice trumped maximum immediate yield, created agricultural systems that supported dense populations without depleting the land. The calendar itself, reconciling solar and lunar cycles, required Athena's wisdom to create and maintain. Adding intercalary months to keep seasons aligned with dates demanded careful observation and mathematical calculation. Different cities had different calendars, but all struggled with the same fundamental problem: how to create human order that respected cosmic rhythms. The Metonic cycle, repeating every 19 years, provided a solution elegant in its complexity, showing how patient observation could reveal patterns spanning decades. In metallurgy, Athena's influence was felt in the alloys that made civilization possible. Bronze itself was a divine gift copper made useful through addition of tin in precise proportions. Too little tin and the metal remained soft, too much and it became brittle. The knowledge of proportions, temperatures, and techniques passed through guild structures that mirrored her temple's hierarchies. Master smiths were priests of a sort, transforming raw earth into tools and weapons through understanding of hidden principles. The development of iron working required even greater wisdom. Iron's higher melting point demanded new furnace designs. Its tendency to rust required understanding of protective treatments, but its abundance compared to tin-mated democratic iron tools could be available to all, not just elites. Athena's influence was seen in how this technological revolution was managed, with iron weapons controlled while iron plowshares spread freely, prioritizing civilization's growth over military advantage. Coinage, invented in Lydia but perfected in Athens, showed Athena's understanding of abstract representation. A piece of metal became valuable not for its material, but for what it represented: stored labor, future goods, social trust. The owl on Athenian tetradrachms was more than decoration. It was a promise backed by divine authority that the coin contained its stated silver content. This trust enabled commerce across vast distances between strangers, creating wealth through exchange rather than mere accumulation. Navigation advanced under Athena's guidance from coastal hugging to open ocean sailing. Understanding star positions, reading wave patterns, interpreting bird behavior, all required the systematic observation she championed. The Periplus texts, describing coastal features and distances, represented collective wisdom accumulated over generations. But beyond mere wayfinding, navigation became metaphor. Odysseus' wanderings were as much spiritual journey as physical displacement. Each island a lesson in some aspect of human nature. Time measurement evolved from simple sundials to complex water clocks and mechanical devices. But Athena's wisdom was seen not just in the mechanisms, but in understanding time's different qualities. Chronos was sequential time, measurable and uniform. Kairos was the right time, the moment when action would be most effective. Wisdom lay in recognizing which type of time governed different activities, when to watch the clock, and when to watch for opportunity. In education, Athena's influence created systems that developed whole human beings rather than narrow specialists. The gymnasium trained bodies and minds together, recognizing their interdependence. Young men exercised naked not from exhibitionism, but to demonstrate they had nothing to hide, that they were willing to be vulnerable in pursuit of excellence. Athletic competition was paired with musical and rhetorical contests, valuing grace and eloquence alongside strength and speed. The Ephibeia, Athens system of military and civic training for young men, embodied Athena's comprehensive approach. Ephebes learned not just weapon handling, but law, not just formation drill, but philosophy. They served as border guards, giving them practical responsibility while keeping them under senior supervision. The 2-year program transformed boys into citizens, understanding their duties as well as their rights, prepared to participate in democracy's demands. For those who showed aptitude, higher education in the philosophical schools offered deeper wisdom. But Athena's influence ensured this was not mere intellectual exercise. Students in the academy maintained the grove, participating in the physical upkeep of their learning space. Aristotle's students at the Lyceum collected and catalogued specimens, grounding abstract theory in concrete observation. Even the most ethereal metaphysics was anchored in lived experience. The symposium, that characteristic Greek institution, showed Athena's understanding that wisdom emerged through structured social interaction. Wine mixed with water in precise proportions, never drunk unmixed loosened tongues without destroying judgment. Conversation followed established patterns, each participant speaking in turn, topics proposed and developed collectively. Games and entertainment interspersed serious discussion, recognizing that play and profundity could enhance each other. Women's education, limited by social constraints, still felt Athena's influence. In Sparta, girls exercised and competed almost as rigorously as boys, producing mothers capable of bearing strong children. In Athens, while formal education was restricted, domestic arts provided their own intellectual challenges. Managing a complex household required mathematical skills for budgeting, chemical knowledge for dyeing, and food preservation, psychological insight for handling diverse personalities among family and slaves. The heterae, those educated courtesans who participated in symposia, represented a unique educational phenomenon. Trained in music, poetry, philosophy, and rhetoric, as well as erotic arts, they could hold their own in intellectual discussion with the best educated men. Aspasia, Pericles' companion, was said to have contributed to his famous funeral oration. These women embodied Athena's principle that wisdom could flourish even in constrained circumstances, that limitations could spark creative adaptations. Mystery religions, those secret cults that promised initiates special knowledge and blessed afterlives, showed Athena's influence in their educational structure. The Eleusinian mysteries, primarily devoted to Demeter and Persephone, included Athena among the deities honored. Initiates progressed through degrees of revelation, each building on the last, creating a systematic approach to spiritual development. The requirement for silence about ultimate secrets taught that some knowledge could only be experienced, not explained. The Orphic mysteries, with their complex cosmologies and ritual requirements, appealed to intellectuals seeking systematic understanding of existence. Their vegetarianism and ascetic practices aimed to purify the soul for reception of wisdom. The Orphic texts, written and rewritten over centuries, showed evolution of thought while maintaining core insights. Athena's influence was seen in their emphasis on personal responsibility for spiritual development rather than mere ritual observance. Even the Dionysian mysteries, seemingly opposite to Athena's rational order, showed her influence in their structure. The apparent chaos of ecstatic worship was carefully orchestrated, with specific roles, ritual sequences, and safety measures. The temporary dissolution of normal consciousness served ultimately to strengthen appreciation for civilized order. Athena understood that acknowledging and channeling irrational forces was wiser than attempting to suppress them entirely. The development of theater, growing from Dionysian worship into the characteristic art form of Athens, showed Athena's hand in transforming primitive ritual into sophisticated cultural expression. Tragedy's exploration of cosmic justice, the consequences of hubris, the conflict between divine will and human desire, all served her educational purposes. Audiences experienced catharsis, purging excessive emotions through vicarious participation in staged extremes. Comedy, too, served Athena's purposes by revealing folly through exaggeration. Aristophanes' biting satires of political figures and social trends provided a safety valve for discontent, while reinforcing community values through mockery of their violation. The convention that anything could be said in comedy, that no person or institution was too sacred for humor, embodied wisdom's understanding that laughter could teach lessons impervious to serious argument. The very architecture of theaters showed Athena's influence. The acoustics that allowed actors to be heard by thousands without amplification required precise mathematical calculation. The sight lines ensuring every seat could see the action demanded understanding of human perception. The orchestra where the chorus danced, the skein providing backdrop and changing area, the mechanical devices allowing gods to appear from above all, integrated to create experiences that transported audiences while teaching eternal truths. As our long contemplation of Athena's wisdom begins to spiral toward its close, we must consider how her influence persisted even as the classical world gave way to new orders. When Romans conquered Greece militarily, they were conquered culturally in return. Minerva, the Roman equivalent of Athena, took on her Greek counterpart's attributes while adapting to Roman pragmatism. Roman law, the most lasting legacy of that empire, showed Athena's influence in its systematic approach to justice. Its attempt to create universal principles transcending local customs. When Christianity arose, claiming to supersede pagan wisdom, Athena's influence persisted in transformed guise. The concept of holy wisdom, Hagia Sophia, built upon foundations she had laid, the great church in Constantinople bearing that name, attempted architecturally what Athena had always taught: the marriage of mathematical perfection with spiritual aspiration. Medieval scholasticism, with its careful logical arguments about divine matters, followed methods Athena would have recognized and approved. During the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered classical texts preserved in Islamic libraries, Athena's influence resurged explicitly. Botticelli painted her as the civilizing force taming the centaur of barbarism. Scholars seeking to reconcile pagan wisdom with Christian faith found in her a model for sanctified reason. The very idea of the Renaissance rebirth of classical knowledge embodied her teaching that wisdom, apparently lost, waited patiently to be rediscovered by those who sought it. The scientific revolution, seeming to overthrow ancient authorities, actually fulfilled Athena's deepest teachings. The empirical method, systematic observation, hypothesis formation, experimental testing, was what she had always advocated. When Galileo turned his telescope skyward, he was following the path of those ancient astronomers who had mapped the heavens through patient watching. When Newton discovered mathematical laws governing motion, he was revealing the cosmic order Athena had always insisted lay beneath apparent chaos. The Enlightenment's emphasis on reason as the guide to human progress was Athena's wisdom adapted to new times. The encyclopedists attempting to catalog all knowledge followed the Alexandrian librarian's example. Democratic revolutions claiming that legitimate government required consent of the governed, built upon foundations laid in the Athenian assembly. The idea of universal human rights emerged from the principle that justice transcended local prejudices. Even in our modern era, as technology advances at rates that would have seemed magical to the ancients, Athena's influence persists. Computer science, built on rigorous logic and mathematical principles, embodies her systematic approach to problem solving. The internet, attempting to make all human knowledge instantly accessible, pursues the dream of the Library of Alexandria by new means. Artificial intelligence research seeks to understand and replicate the very consciousness that Athena represents. But perhaps more important than these technological manifestations are the quieter ways her wisdom continues to work. In every classroom where a teacher patiently guides students toward understanding rather than mere memorization, Athena is present. In every courtroom where justice is sought through reasoned argument rather than force or favoritism, her influence is felt. In every workshop where craftspeople take pride in excellence for its own sake, her standards are maintained. The ecological movement, recognizing that human cleverness must be tempered by wisdom about long-term consequences, embodies lessons the goddess always taught. Understanding that we are part of nature rather than separate from it, that sustainable practices trump short-term profits, that diversity strengthens systems, these insights align with Athena's holistic vision. The olive tree remains a perfect symbol, useful in multiple ways, beautiful in its gnarled persistence, requiring patience to cultivate, but rewarding that patience abundantly. In medicine, the movement toward evidence-based practice and personalized treatment follows paths Athena indicated, understanding that healing involves mind and body together, that prevention surpasses cure, that the physician's role is to support natural healing processes. These principles echo ancient wisdom in modern form. The Hippocratic Oath, still taken in modified form by many doctors, maintains the ethical framework she helped establish. Educational reforms emphasizing critical thinking over rote learning, interdisciplinary approaches over narrow specialization, practical application alongside theoretical understanding, all reflect Athena's comprehensive vision of human development. The recognition that different students learn differently, that wisdom comes in many forms, that emotional and social intelligence matter alongside academic achievement, shows her influence adapting to contemporary insights. In governance, the ongoing struggle to balance individual freedom with collective needs, to create systems that serve justice while remaining flexible enough to evolve, continues work Athena began. Every peaceful transfer of power, every expansion of rights to previously excluded groups, every reform that makes systems more transparent and accountable, represents a victory for her principles over the forces of tyranny and chaos. The feminist movement's assertion that women's wisdom deserves equal recognition with men's claims an inheritance Athena embodied. Her virginity represented not rejection of femininity, but insistence that female power need not be mediated through relationships with males. Modern women claiming spaces in fields traditionally reserved for men's science, philosophy, governance, warfare follow paths the goddess marked, even when they don't consciously invoke her name. In the arts, the ongoing tension between innovation and tradition, between individual expression and communal meaning, plays out dynamics Athena always navigated. Every artist who masters technical skills in service of greater vision, who understands that true creativity requires discipline as well as inspiration, who seeks not just to express, but to communicate, works within frameworks she established. As we approach the end of our contemplation, it's appropriate to consider how Athena's wisdom applies to the act of sleep itself, the state toward which this narrative has been gently guiding you. Sleep, that daily mystery where consciousness releases its grip and allows other processes to work, embodies principles the goddess always taught. Just as she emerged from Zeus' head fully formed, dreams often present solutions to problems that waking minds have struggled with fruitlessly. The stages of sleep, cycling through different depths and qualities, mirror the levels of understanding Athena revealed to initiates. Surface sleep, like superficial knowledge, provides some rest, but lacks transformative power. Deep sleep, where dreams don't even form, represents the profound unconscious, where real restoration occurs. REM sleep, with its vivid dreams and rapid eye movements, shows the mind actively processing experiences, weaving new connections, creating the patterns that will emerge as tomorrow's insights. Athena understood that wisdom required both active pursuit and receptive allowing, both focused attention and relaxed awareness. Sleep exemplifies this paradox. We cannot force it through will, but must create conditions that allow it to arise naturally. The bedtime rituals that prepare us for sleep, dimming lights, quieting activities, releasing the days, concerns parallel the purifications required before entering her sacred precincts. In dreams, the normal rules of logic and causation suspend, allowing truths to emerge in symbolic form. The ancients understood dreams as messages from gods, and while we may interpret them psychologically rather than theologically, the principle remains unconscious wisdom often surpasses conscious cleverness. Athena's own emergence from thought into form suggests that the most profound creations gestate in darkness before emerging into light. The restoration sleep goes beyond mere physical rest. During sleep, the brain consolidates memories, transferring important information from temporary to long-term storage while discarding the trivial. This process of selection and integration mirrors Athena's own method, not accumulating indiscriminately, but choosing what deserves preservation. The forgetting that sleep enables is as important as the remembering, clearing space for tomorrow's experiences. Modern sleep research has revealed what ancient wisdom intuited, that sleep deprivation impairs judgment, emotional regulation, and creative problem solving. The clarity that comes with good rest isn't just absence of fatigue, but presence of renewed capacity. Athena's owls, nocturnal creatures who see clearly in darkness, remind us that some forms of perception require stepping away from day's bright certainty into night's receptive mystery. As you prepare to cross sleep's threshold, consider how today's experiences will be woven into your deeper understanding. Perhaps you'll dream of olive groves, where each tree represents a piece of wisdom waiting to be discovered. Perhaps you'll find yourself in a vast library, where every book you've ever read or wished to read waits patiently on ordered shelves. Perhaps you'll stand in Athena's temple, feeling the cool marble beneath bare feet, breathing incense-scented air, receiving wordless teachings that tomorrow will translate into unexpected insights. Or perhaps you'll simply rest, deep and dreamless, allowing your mind to perform its necessary maintenance without conscious participation. This too is wisdom, knowing when to release control, trusting processes beyond immediate understanding. Athena, born from thought, also blessed thoughtlessness when appropriate, the emptying that precedes new filling, the silence from which meaningful words emerge. The goddess, who never slept in the human sense, understood sleep's necessity for mortals. In her temples, special chambers were set aside for incubation, ritual sleep, where suppliants sought healing dreams. The procedures were precise purification, offerings, prayers, then lying on sacred couches, awaiting divine visitation. But the essential element was receptivity, the willing vulnerability of unconsciousness in sacred space. Modern life often treats sleep as unfortunate necessity, time stolen from productivity. Athena's wisdom suggests instead that sleep is productivity of a different kind, that the third of our lives spent unconscious enables the two-thirds spent awake. Without processing, dreams provide. Experiences remain unintegrated. Without rest's restoration, even the sharpest mind grows dull. Without the daily death and rebirth of consciousness, life becomes monotonous repetition rather than spiraling growth. As this narrative winds toward its conclusion, like a great spiral staircase descending into peaceful darkness, remember that endings are also beginnings. Tomorrow you'll wake with this story incorporated into your being, its images and ideas woven into your mental fabric. Some you'll remember clearly, others will work beneath conscious awareness, all contributing to the gradual accumulation of understanding that constitutes wisdom. Athena's greatest gift was not any single invention or intervention, but the capacity for wisdom itself, the ability to learn from experience, to recognize patterns, to choose thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. This gift operates continuously, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. Every night's sleep strengthens neural connections that embody learning. Every dream reshuffles experiences into new configurations that might reveal previously hidden relationships. The owl calls now in the darkness outside your window, or perhaps it's just wind in the trees, or a distant car, or your own breath deepening toward sleep. It doesn't matter whether physical owls patrol your neighborhood. What matters is that you've heard the call to wisdom, felt the invitation to rest in understanding that tomorrow's challenges will be met with resources renewed by tonight's rest. Let your thoughts settle now like sediment in still water, each finding its proper level. The urgent concerns of the day sink toward bottom, their weight ensuring they'll be there when needed, but allowing clearer perception above. Medium-term projects and relationships hover in middle depths, accessible but not intrusive. And at the surface, only the gentlest ripples of immediate sensation, the comfort of your position, the rhythm of your breathing, the soft darkness behind closed eyelids. Athena stands guardian over this transition from waking to sleeping, her gray eyes seeing clearly what yours cannot. She who emerged from thought blesses your temporary release from thinking's burden. She who champions order allows the creative chaos of dreams. She who demands excellence accepts your simple presence, requiring nothing more than that you rest and restore yourself for tomorrow's opportunities to grow in wisdom. The ancient words of blessing flow across millennia to touch this moment. May your sleep be peaceful as olive groves in moonlight. May your dreams bring insight wrapped in symbols protective veiling. May you wake refreshed as Athens after rain, ready to build and weave and judge and learn. May wisdom accumulate in you like oil pressed from countless olives, each day's small pressures contributing to an eventual golden flow. And now, as words dissolve into wordlessness, as narrative becomes silence, as attention releases into absence, Athena's work continues. In temples ruined and rebuilt, in libraries burned and reestablished, in every mind that chooses understanding over ignorance, in every heart that prefers justice to advantage, in every hand that creates rather than destroys, the goddess maintains her eternal vigil. Sleep comes now, inevitable as tide, gentle as olive leaves brushing stone, deep as wells that reflect stars. In this sleep, you join all who have ever sought wisdom's blessing, all who have ever recognized that true strength comes not from force, but from understanding, not from certainty, but from thoughtful engagement with complexity. You become part of the great tapestry Athena weaves, one thread among countless others, but essential to the pattern's completion. Rest now in the embrace of ancient wisdom that is also eternally new. Let Athena's gray gaze be the last image before darkness claims you. Those eyes that see through all pretense to the potential within, that judge without condemning, that teach without lecturing, that protect without imprisoning. Know that you are seen, understood, accepted, and challenged to become more fully yourself, to manifest whatever wisdom your unique nature can contribute to the whole. The story ends, but doesn't end, completes but continues, finishes but transforms into tomorrow's beginning, like the olive tree that seems dead in winter drought, but sends new shoots with spring rain, like the owl that disappears at dawn, but returns with dusk, like wisdom itself that sometimes hides but always waits for those who seek it. This narrative releases you into sleep's mystery while promising reunion when consciousness returns. May Athena's blessing follow you through all the watches of the night, through every level of sleep's descent and return. May you rest as deeply as ancient roots, dream as freely as olive branches in wind, wake as clearly as her gray eyes perceive truth, and may the wisdom planted by this story flower in ways you cannot now imagine, but will recognize with joy when they bloom. Sleep now, beloved of Athena, cradled in wisdom's protective embrace, assured that morning will find you renewed and ready for whatever teachings await. The gray-eyed goddess maintains her vigil as you release yours, watching over the sleep of all who honor wisdom, all who seek understanding, all who choose the harder path of thoughtful engagement over the easier road of unconscious reaction. In the final moment before sleep claims you completely, perhaps you feel it the lightest touch on your forehead, cool as olive oil, gentle as owl's feather, precise as weaver's finger on thread. This is Athena's benediction, her seal upon your rest, her promise that wisdom's work continues even in unconsciousness, that every ending enables new beginning, that sleep itself is sacred when undertaken mindfully. And so you spiral down into darkness that is not absence, but presence of different kind, into silence that speaks volumes, into ending that begins everything anew. Athena smiles her subtle smile, knowing that another seeker has accepted wisdom's gift. Another consciousness has opened to receive what patient darkness offers. Another thread has been woven into the eternal tapestry of understanding. Sleep well, dream deep, wake wise. The goddess watches and waits and weaves,